Coming to you on Secular Media Network, this is the Atheist Manifesto. Hello and welcome to the Atheist Manifesto, your source for news, commentary, discussion, and debate at the intersection of the atheist movement and the LGBT rights movement. I'm your host, Callie Wright, flying solo today thanks to some technical problems. Thank you, Windows 10, for just ruining everything. Today we're talking about parents. Parent relationships with their children, children's relationships with their parents. We're going to talk to my friend Ashley, who grew up with two moms. We have a seriously amazing interview with my friend Dany, who is a trans man, and his mom Charlene about their journey together through Dany's transition. But first, I wanted to talk a little bit about my own sort of complicated relationship, mostly with my grandma, but also my mom too. See, I always kind of looked at my grandma like a second mom because I grew up without an involved father. My dad never chose to be a part of my life, and for many various and complicated reasons, still is not a part of my life. So I spent lots of time with grandma. I was grandma's favorite grandkid. She bought me my first guitar, she bought me my first guitar amp, and I was kind of the only one of her grandkids that actually went out of my way to spend time with her. So we were super, super close, and coming out as atheist never changed that. We would have some annoying arguments and that kind of thing, but we never clashed. It never changed our relationship or anything, but coming out as trans was a whole different thing. Her initial reaction was great, more than I could hope for, but when it came time to change pronouns, use a different name, that sort of thing, that's when things became less okay between us, and our relationship is strained almost to the breaking point now. The problem here is when you're dealing with parents, people in your life, whatever, these are obviously big changes, coming out as trans. Coming out as gay or atheist too, but coming out as trans especially because it actually involves someone having to modify their behavior and the way that they talk to you, using different pronouns, using a different name, expecting you to wear different kinds of clothes, different hairstyles. I was always the person that had the sweet beard, and all of a sudden, I want to burn it off on my face and that kind of thing. So it's absolutely a big change, and people have a right to ask for time to get used to it, because for most trans people, it's something that we've wrestled with most or all of our lives. So by the time we get the courage to come out, we're ready to just hit the ground running and go. But sometimes a lot of times it's not that easy for the people in our lives, because where we've been wrestling with this our entire lives, and we've had the benefit of the internet to do all the relevant research, and by the time we come out, we're ready to go. For many folks in our lives, it's a brand new thing. And, my mom and my grandma both didn't know what the word transgender meant when I came out. So I not only had to come out and have that conversation, but I also had to do a lot of educating. Like, what exactly does this mean? My mom and my grandma both thought that I was telling them I was bisexual. My grandma said, "So does this mean you like boys now too?" And my mom's response was, "So are you involved with someone and you want me to meet them? Is that why you're telling me now?" And I just said, "Well, do you know what transgender means?" And both of them basically said kind of, it wasn't verbatim, but they said something along the lines of, "Well, maybe I don't. You should probably just start from the beginning." So, and obviously my grandma and my mom have taken greatly different paths since then. My mom has been very supportive and uses the right name and pronouns. we're well past the initial awkwardness, and we've had those difficult conversations about, feeling like she's losing a son and all of that sort of stuff. But through it all, my mom's attitude has been, if this is what you need for you to be happy, then this is what I want you to do. I just need your help along the way dealing with it. And I think that's a perfectly reasonable question for someone to ask. I had friends ask the same thing of me. I need time. Give me time. It's something that I need to adjust to, but I love you and I want you to be happy. So if this is a thing you need to do, then do it and we'll figure out the rest. I don't think anyone could ask for a better reaction to their coming out than that, because I think a lot of times it's hard for us to recognize as trans people, and to some degree even, atheists and gay people and bisexual people, we're not necessarily the only ones on this journey. The people that we love, our spouses, our significant others, brothers, sisters, moms, dads, aunts, uncles, they're all in this journey with us to an extent where, they're having to come to terms with the person they know to be versus what society has always taught them about gender, what gender means, what those roles are. I often think that about my grandma. I get really mad at my grandma sometimes because she says really, frankly, horrible things about gay people and about trans people, and has even made just crappy comments about what my friends and I must do when we're out and about, and I just thought to myself, like, look, I'm not one to toot my own horn here, but I've made my life about trying to help people. And her response to that is, well, I probably don't want to know what you and your friends do when you're out. And that was a really hurtful thing to hear, because, at that point I've realized that everything my life is about is something that one of the most important people in my life is against. And that was a really, really hard thing. Well, I use it in past tense. It is a really hard thing, because I remember, this is my grandma. This is, I spent every weekend at her house as a kid. She took me to movies, even like secular movies that she hated because, she's a conservative Christian, but because I wanted to go and she was a good grandma, she would take me. She took me to see the Star Wars remakes when they were in the theaters when I was a kid. She took me to a Star Trek convention once. Drove a friend and I 3 hours north of where I live to go to a Star Trek convention, even though she thought it was silly. And she would watch Star Trek with me, even though she thought it was silly and didn't get any of it. And I have all of these wonderful, wonderful memories with my grandma. And to now know that we're on just completely opposite sides of this whole thing. She gives money to groups that fight against my equality. And I don't quite know how to handle that, because it's really easy for you to look at someone who's out protesting gay marriage or protesting any sort of equal rights amendment or anything like that and see them as the enemy. But now apparently my grandma is the enemy. But she's not. But she is. And that's a really, really tough thing to deal with. And frankly, I'm lucky in that it's only complicated a few important relationships in my life. I think my mom still struggles with it, probably more than she lets on. She doesn't seem super interested in hearing me talk about all the cool things that I'm doing, and speaking at conferences and, seeing that people in other, in countries outside the one that I live in are listening to my podcast. And, some of the cool emails that I get where somebody says, something that I said helped them. These are all my dreams coming true. And you'll hear in the interview later with Dany and Charlene talks about that as a parent. You have lots of dreams for your kid. And when you realize that your kid may not necessarily be who you thought they were, you have to give those dreams up and you have to build new dreams. And I'm not a parent, so I don't want to speak on behalf of parents, but if I could even partially sort of put myself in that mindset, I can definitely see how that would be a really, really difficult thing to deal with. So I don't really blame my mom for struggling to an extent with this whole thing. Because before I was her son, and I was, the person, like, I wanted to be a rock star, and I was traveling and playing guitar in bands, and, and I would get the speeches about how I had to have a fallback plan and a real job and all that sort of stuff. But that's what you're supposed to say as a parent because it's good advice. But now all of that has changed, and I'm not actually the person not entirely the person that my mom knew growing up. And I think she struggles with that a little bit more than she lets on. And that's really hard. She doesn't seem super interested in talking about it, which kind of hurts. I don't begrudge anything that she's struggling with. Like I said, just imagining to the small extent that I can being in her place, I probably would struggle too. I just wish that she would talk about it more. My grandma initiates conversations with me every once in a while, and they usually turn into a really, really frustrating series of statements. And we've had literally one adult conversation that didn't devolve into her saying super hurtful things. And of course it was about surgery. She just asked me a bunch of questions about what the surgery entails and what it involves, and was asking me how much research I'd done on it. And I was like, hello, have you met me? I'm from the internet. So that's kind of a roundup of my complicated relationships there. That's to say nothing of my aunt. I mean, growing up without a dad, I spent probably the first 8 or 9 years of my life with my mom and my aunt living together. So my aunt helped raise me, in a lot of ways like my grandma did. And my aunt now just refuses to talk to me about anything trans-related. She'll talk to me in the context of pretending like this whole thing doesn't exist. But when I've tried to initiate conversations with her, so basically before Thanksgiving 2 years ago, I sent her a message on Facebook and I said, hey, this thing is happening, and I am presenting differently, and I'm going to look a lot different, and I don't want there to be any surprise or confusion or uncomfortableness or whatever. And the response that I got back was, I love you too. And I thought, well, that's good. I'm glad to know that. But I was kind of looking for a little more. I wanted to know, hey, like, are you okay with this? Or do you support me? Do you not support me? Like, what's going on? And I got, I love you too. And I figured, well, okay, that's a start. I'm not going to push. And I've tried to have conversations since, before family events or anything like that, where I knew we were going to be in the same place. And I said, hey, this is a thing that's happening, and I'm pretty far along now. Just wanted to kind of give you an update. Oh, and by the way, it's been a year or so. So, my name is Callie now, and my pronouns are she, her, hers now. And she flat out refused. And I said, okay, I hope you understand why all this is important. And I did the hard sell. And I said, well, look, you have to understand, I've been able to do all of these awesome things because I'm now comfortable with myself. I speak in front of groups of people. I helped run a nonprofit at the time where we would go to events and we would talk to people about sexual violence and help people heal. And I was able to do all of these great things because I was finally comfortable with myself. And I said, so because I know you love me and you want me to be happy, I hope you understand why this is a thing that I have to do. And I got nothing. No response. Ever. And this was in early November of last year. And she still tries to pretend that it doesn't exist. So I've kind of given up on that. I'm not burning any bridges. I'm not going to tell anybody to F off. I'm just silently bowing out. And if they choose to, reinitiate a relationship with me, that's something that I'm definitely open to. But I'm done pursuing people in places that I'm obviously not wanted or welcomed in. And that hurts. It hurts a lot. A lot of people are very fond of saying that, you can choose your family too, and sometimes your chosen family is more than your blood family. And I get that. I really do. And I have people that I'm not blood related to who are siblings to me, who are family to me. My mom's best friend growing up was my uncle. And, I have friends who are closer to me than many people in my family. And I don't want to downplay those relationships at all. And maybe it's just a silly, cultural thing that I'm not so easily dismissive of, well, if they don't, if they can't accept you, they don't really love you anyways. And, to an extent, I definitely think that that's true, but it's really not so easy for me to say, well, screw them then. I don't want anything to do with them either. So I'm working on it. I'm learning to just be grateful for what I have and be grateful for that I've lost so little in this process compared to some people I know who have lost absolutely everything. So that's going to be my rant for the episode. We're going to take a quick break, and we will be back with my friend Ashley, who grew up with two moms. More Atheist Manifesto coming up.
Hello, I'm Alan Cumming. Live Out Loud is calling on the LGBT community to help improve life for gay teens. Take what you know and gay it forward through the Homecoming Project, a chance to return to your old high school and share your story with LGBTQ youth. Your life experiences and wisdom can prove invaluable to teens who may be struggling with their own identities and paths in life. One day can make a lasting difference. Gay it forward with the Homecoming Project. Find us at liveoutloud.info to learn how you can get involved today.
Are you tired of being informed by all the information Callie's giving you?
You wish you had a podcast to listen to that didn't make you think about confusing things and difficult social issues. Waiting for Wrath, the beer-guzzling podcast you listen to when you're done being informed.
Before we jump back into the show, it's time to thank our patrons. Thank you so much for believing in us enough to contribute to us financially and for being a part of this movement. Patrons of the Atheist Manifesto have access to all sorts of cool stuff, like a big shout out on the show, premium content, including an audio journal I've decided to keep documenting the more personal stuff I don't dive into on the show, and an exclusive patrons-only hangout once a month. If you're so inclined, head over to patreon.com/thegaytheist Manifesto to become a part of this movement and support the show. Thank you. Ashley, welcome to the Atheist Manifesto.
Hey.
So, you grew up, as I understand it, with two moms, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so talk to me a little bit about that. What was that like as a kid? I mean, did you recognize that your family structure was a little bit different than what was traditional?
Well, I mean, I remember when my parents were married. I was really young, about 4, when they actually officially got their divorce. So I remember that we lived with my dad at some point in time, but I remember thinking in like 2nd grade when somebody said she went home and did homework with her dad. I was like, you get to see your dad every day? Shut up. That's so cool. And so that's the only thing I really remember, like, sticking out in my mind that really was different, but I didn't realize that we were different. No.
Gotcha. So, and at what point did that come up?
That we were different?
Yeah.
I think I just kind of figured it out over time. My mom had always introduced her partner as her roommate, which I think is really common now. But at that time, it wasn't normal to have a woman with four children, I guess, for a single mom to have a roommate, like, you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't normal.
Right.
So I figured out that it wasn't normal when I got a lot of questions from adults.
Nice.
And I would say that happened around maybe 4th or 5th grade when I was doing sports and having, like, carpool situations, because my parents always worked jobs that really couldn't cater to us doing, like, extracurriculars. So we always had to get rides and that type of thing.
Gotcha. So in conversation, obviously they're like, oh, so your mom and dad, blah, 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 your mom and dad. And like, so did you let that stuff go? Or was there ever a point where like, no, actually it's mom and mom? Like, was there ever a conversation like that happened as a kid?
No, not being small. I would always say mom, but in my mind it meant moms. And whenever I said parents, it meant moms. But typically, I don't remember having a lot of those specific conversations. I remember having parents, like, what do your parents do? What do your, like, what does your mom do? And then I would just say, my mom does this. And then they say, what does your dad do? I would say, well, my dad does this. And that was it. Like, I never associated the two, if that makes any sense.
Gotcha. So, I mean, was it something that you felt like you had to hide? Like, were you afraid that people would find out, like, because eventually you did figure out it was different? Was it something that like really colored your upbringing at all in that way?
I didn't realize that it was a big deal until maybe 7th or 8th grade. I remember one of my girlfriends had actually figured it out. And when she figured it out was when I kind of realized, like, that's what this is. Like, I get it now. Like, I really get it. Whereas before, when it's your parents, you don't think about your parents doing anything, besides going to work and bringing you home food. Right. When she figured out was when I kind of pieced things together and was like, oh, that's cool. My dad wasn't really happy about it, obviously, for a lot of obvious reasons. And I remember him making a lot of negative comments when we were little, when they were first going through the divorce, but not a lot after the actual separation. Mostly because they didn't. My mom didn't meet when my parents were actually, when they actually separated. They met several months after. But as far as, hiding it, I never felt like I needed to until maybe once I actually hit high school and people were so judgmental and so just negative all the time. I never felt like it was okay to even bring up this subject. So I specifically remember just not talking about it and just saying parents instead of mom and dad or mom and moms.
Gotcha. And you mentioned that they both worked a lot. So was that an issue with them coming to PTA meetings or different things that parents just show up to with their kids? Was there any sort of strategic planning that had to go on surrounding that to not, ruffle feathers and that kind of thing? They didn't participate in any of the parent stuff at school. And it was honest to God was because, their work schedules, they worked office jobs. They worked 9 to 5 or 8. It's really 8 to 5, 8 to 6:30, 8 to 7, how office jobs are now. Sure.
But it really was because they worked in the office. They never did PTA. That was always something that happened, during the day or during the week or, for the moms that stayed home or worked part-time. And those were, most of my friends' moms worked part-time or had more flexible schedules, so it didn't ever come up. They never did field trip days or anything like that. My school system was pretty closed-minded, and I'm sure that there was a reason behind that, but I never noticed. I never felt like they missed something because I knew they were working.
Gotcha. So it wasn't necessarily specifically because, they were afraid of finding out, that they were a gay couple. It was just, practical life stuff, which makes sense.
It may have been strategically done that way, to protect us, but it was never shared. It was never mentioned. It was never something that I noticed was a struggle for them.
Gotcha. So, what about sleepovers and stuff and, having your friends over to your house? Was that just a thing where, you always went over to your friends' houses, or, how did that kind of thing work out?
Yeah, we never had sleepovers at our house, ever. I remember one specifically. Maybe there were two. There were two for me. I remember my birthday is in a winter month, and so 9 times out of 10, my birthday was canceled because it snowed.
Gotcha.
So I remember one birthday where there was a sleepover, but the girls that I was that I had actually invited, that I remember being allowed to invite, were the girls that I had known since kindergarten and first grade. They were people that my parents knew, like my parents knew their parents. So that may have been why they were actually allowed to spend the night. But no, there were no sleepovers at our house, and I always went to somebody else's house if I was really allowed to spend the night at all. My parents were really protective, I think, over our feelings and what could come up if, you know, I remember them asking a lot of questions about my friends' parents and wanting to meet them before and all of that. I thought they were being overprotective, but I think, you know, they were in a parent way and also from their standpoint.
Gotcha. And so you have siblings too, like, was the same kind of, you're the oldest of your siblings, is that correct? I don't remember. I remember.
No, I am not the oldest.
Do you think
I'm like the middle?
I gotcha. Okay. So, I mean, obviously, you know, having siblings, obviously, you know, each sibling has a slightly different relationship with their parents, and I'm not asking you to necessarily speak on your siblings' behalf, but do you think the experiences were similar or different for them as well, or?
Well, I think they were different. My oldest sibling had more knowledge and like memories of living with our dad, so I think that they struggled with that more than I did, or even the younger siblings did. And definitely during like teenager rebellion years, I never had that, but my older sibling totally had that. And I know that came up, and there were a lot of hurtful conversations. I never had that. I never felt angry about our situation. I never felt like, oh, if we just lived with that. I never felt that way. I probably have a little bit of a more unique situation when it comes to my father, though. He's not around. He's not very reliable. That, you know, that kind of situation. And then my younger siblings, when it came out in high school that I had lesbian parents, I think that it gave my parents more of an opportunity to be more open, and I think my younger siblings were able to work through that in a different way than my older sibling and I were, if that makes any sense, just because they were already open.
Yeah,
kind of out.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. So what about now? You know, is it something that you feel like, because obviously, I mean, people talk about their parents in regular everyday conversation. I'm sure you're like, hi, my name's Ashley. I have 2 moms. But, like, obviously, you know, you talk about your parents in conversation and, you know, family get-togethers and all that kinds of stuff. And, you know, you talk about that stuff at work and, you know, with people that you don't necessarily know that you can trust. Like, how do you navigate that in places where you're not, like, you know, you're not talking to friends or something like that, where you don't know who you're talking to? How do you navigate that today as an adult?
Well, I would have to say after high school, it was a little different. I lost a lot of friends. Well, there obviously were very good friends, but people who I considered friends in high school when it all came out that I had gay parents. And so I was really angry about that, but not at my parents, at the people who sucked and were closed-minded. And so I would tell people almost immediately, like, hi, I'm Ashley. Like, you seem really cool. We're probably going to be friends. Just so you know, this is my situation. And if you don't like it, that's fine. I just don't want to talk to you.
Right.
But now, because I think in, you know, our section of the state, I think that not everybody is very open-minded still, and there are still a lot of opinions, and there's jokes that just get thrown around on the regular, and I just think it's crap. And to put somebody in a situation like that just because you don't know them, like, to that depth, I just think it's crappy. And so there were a couple of work situations where I was like, look, that's not okay. Like, you can't just say stuff like that. There are customers here. There are people around. And you just made me feel like crap. Like, what kind of, like, you suck. And so I would be really open about it immediately. But now that I'm more in my professional career, I really just feel people out. I'm really open. I'm really open when it comes to, like, hi, Ashley, these are, if they ask, like, my interests and things I do, and then, like, as it's like a layering process. As I develop a relationship with them, I kind of let them know. The office that I'm working out right now, I would say half of them are a little bit more on they just disagree with homosexuality in general because of their faith. But they're not overbearing about it. They just don't agree with it. They're really open. So you just got to feel people out. I think if I would have just said openly like it was before, like, hey, this is my situation, deal with it. I don't know if I would have developed a relationship with them because I wasn't perceptive of the way they could feel either. So I think that it's a give and take because not everybody is, down at the times.
Yeah, well, it's a tough position to be in. And, I don't make any secret of the fact that I'm trans, but, like, I can sort of choose whether or not I want to tell people I'm an atheist, for example. And,
right.
Part of me is like, the first time somebody brings up something, or, somebody asks me, like, where I go to church or something like that, my first instinct is to want to be like, well, I'm an atheist, I don't go to church. But at the same time, I'm thinking in the back of my head, like, maybe I should let them get to know me first and avoid the question. So later on, once they know me, once they know I'm just a normal person like everyone else, then I can come out. Because at that point, oh my God, I'm friends with an atheist. And I feel like it's kind of the same thing with any sort of flavor of LGBT stuff. Obviously, it sucks that anyone has to hide anything like that about who they are. But if you're talking, strategic ways to build allies and to change minds and stuff, it's really weird how you have to navigate those conversations in a lot of ways.
I think it's just a lot about, I guess I recognize the fact that it's not an age-old idea. Like, I think that when you tell somebody that you're Christian, for example, they're like, oh, okay, I can see that, that's cool. And, like, it's just it. Like, they're done, it's over, the conversation's over. That ideology has been around, that faith has been around for so long that it's just something, like, some people are and some people aren't, and it's no big deal. So I think that when you really recognize the fact that, gay marriage was just legalized, like, just happened, and you think, okay, well, this isn't totally a brand new idea, and, some people may be on the fence about, like, whether they agree with it or disagree with it, or even if their faith allows them to explore the possibility of accepting people. I don't know, I just always kind of think, like, okay, well, what if this person that I'm meeting totally has no idea, and I'm the first person from this community that they're meeting, because I do consider myself a part of the community, like, I'm being closed-minded and rude and just saying accept me, like, that's not a good representation of anybody who's in any kind of community, is to be like an asshole, quite frankly. That's not a good way to go either. So I just kind of think about anytime I meet somebody new or I'm in a new situation, like, I could be the first person they're meeting from this community, at least that they know about.
Right.
And I'm not going to be the person that's going to make them think that this community, like, sucks because I know this girl and she was so, this is the way it is, and if not, you're closed-minded and you're a terrible person. Like, I'm not going to be the person that does that. You know what I mean? So that's how I think when I go into new situations. Yeah. And maybe that's too much, and maybe you shouldn't have to do that, but that's how it works for me, and that's how I'm able to continue to work in a corporate environment and to meet new people when I go out. And, there have been a lot of people that I know, because I am Christian, that, like, oh, I would have never have thought you had two moms. I'm like, why would you have thought I had, like, what do you mean? You know what I mean? Like, yeah. They think differently because they already knew me and they have a foundation of me that they're like, oh, maybe there is more to this. And there are people who have told me that. And I think that, well, at least I helped something. Right.
And you're right. I mean, because I think the same way, because if, for example, I was having a conversation with somebody at work the day that the Supreme Court decision came down, and a coworker of mine was saying that she was arguing with her boyfriend over it because her boyfriend was saying it was unbiblical. And my initial response as an atheist activist was to say, like, well, why does it matter what the Bible says? We don't make laws based on the Bible. Like, if that's what you want to believe, okay, but we don't make laws based on that, but I didn't want to immediately just go into activism mode because I don't know what she's been told about atheists or what experiences she's had or if she's even met one before. So right. in that similar way, I'm thinking in the back of my head, like, well, I want to try and paint as good a picture as possible for her about what people in our community are like. And I came into work and I was like bouncing up and down, and she was like, "Oh, you're in a good mood. Well, like, what are you in such a good mood about?" And I was like, "I got confirmed to speak at my first convention ever." And she was like, "Oh, what's the convention?" And I was like, "Damn it." Like, well, I guess it's coming out now. Like, well, I'm speaking at an atheist convention, because we had already had the, like, I'm queer, I'm transgender, like, we've had those conversations. Like, that was all, weeks old at that point. But yeah, I mean, those are definitely, like, those are tough situations to navigate sometimes. And you're right. I mean, it's a valid thing to be like, it sucks that we have to do this, to hide, any facet of ourselves like that, especially when it doesn't really have anything to do with work, but it comes up just by necessity of everyday conversation. Oh, hey, do you have a boyfriend? Like, I've been asked by a few different people, do you have a boyfriend? Like, well, I actually like girls more than I like guys. So, like, you're forced to come out over and over again.
Oh, that's funny.
Well, I think that about wraps it up here. Thank you so much.
What a great way to end that.
Thank you so much for coming on the show and for sharing your story and your perspective. I really, really appreciate it.
No problem. Anytime.
Coming up next on the Gaytheist Manifesto, we have Miss Ashley from the No Religion Required podcast to talk about her experience parenting as an atheist. More Gaytheist Manifesto coming up.
The staff of Secular Coalition for America lobbies U.S. Congress on issues of separation of church and state, and they've become a powerhouse for change in the United States government. You'll definitely want to subscribe to receive their email action alerts. These are updates for important issues and ones that you can get involved with directly. And hopefully, you'll consider making a contribution to the Secular Coalition for America to help them continue fighting for your equality. You can do it all at secular.org.
Here's an excerpt from Nailed by David Fitzgerald.
Didn't there have to have been a Jesus? Perhaps he was just a wandering teacher or an exorcist, an apocalyptic prophet or a zealot who opposed the Romans. Perhaps he was all these things, or even a composite of several such early first-century figures. But at any rate, surely there had to be somebody at the original core of Christianity, arguably the most famous individual in human history. All this seems to be a perfectly reasonable, completely natural assumption to make, so why would anyone be so foolish as to propose that Jesus never existed? Doesn't it just make more sense to assume that there was a historical Jesus, even if we're unable to recover the real facts about his life and death? As it turns out, no. The opposite is true. The closer we look at the evidence for Jesus, the less solid evidence we find, and the more we find suspicious silences and curious resemblances to the pagan and Jewish religious ideas and philosophies that preceded Christianity. And once you begin to parse out the origins of this tradition or that teaching from their various sources, the sweater begins unraveling quickly until it becomes very difficult to buy that there ever was, or even could have been, any historical figure at the center.
Nailed by David Fitzgerald is now available at atheistaudiobooks.com.
Please welcome to the Gaytheist Manifesto, the one, the only, the mouth of the South, the fantabulous Miss Ashley. Welcome to the show.
Hey, y'all. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I was hoping you would say, hey, y'all.
I cannot go on a show, including mine, and not say, hey, y'all.
Right. So, Miss Ashley is a co-host of the No Religion Required podcast. If you haven't heard it before, I don't know what the hell you're doing with your life. Go check it out. We'll plug the website and stuff at the end of the interview. So, Miss Ashley, you are a mom?
Yes, I am. I'm a proud mom of 2 young boys, a 9-year-old and a 14-year-old who is just starting high school in 2 days.
Oh God. That's probably a mixture of awesome and awful at the same time, right?
Yes, it is, because it's like, okay, have I prepared my son for high school? You know, because, I mean, you can prepare them for elementary school and you can prepare them for middle school, but you're preparing these kids for high school where they're going to be at their most impressionable age.
Well, right, and they're like very definitively their own person at that point. So, you know, your influence is a little bit less, a little bit lessened at that point. So
yes, it is.
So, and you haven't been atheist for a super long time. It's been about a year-ish?
Yes, it's been about a year-ish, yes, ma'am.
So talk me through that. When you were religious, did you do the religious indoctrination thing with your kids? Like, did you, train up a child like the Bible says, and, teaching them all that sort of stuff?
When I had my kids, I was not in church. I didn't attend church regularly. I had detached myself pretty much from the church. I had the mindset that I didn't need a church to love a God. I felt like if I wanted to do any worshiping, I could do it from the inside of my home or in my backyard, that regardless of where I was at, God was going to hear me. And so in raising my children, I taught them, you say your prayers every night, ask for forgiveness for anything that you had done that day. And that they would ask for forgiveness. And God would forgive them. I remember laying in bed with them and repeating prayers and teaching them how to pray to God. And, now when I look back on that, it literally scares the living daylights out of me. I cannot believe that I would sit there and tell my children that if you pray to this God, that for any sins you have, he's going to forgive you. Because I felt like, after I sat back and thought about it, I felt like I was teaching my kids it's okay to do wrong and all you got to do is pray about it and you'll be forgiven.
Wow, yeah, I can see that.
So, it became a very scary thought after I, really stepped away from, the abuse that I was in and that even through my abuse, I taught my kids, well, mommy must have deserved it because God wouldn't give me anything either that I didn't deserve, and plus he wouldn't put anything in front of me that I couldn't handle. And that maybe God was just punishing Mama for sins that she had done in the past. And that was, Mama's way of getting forgiveness from God, is that I had to go through that. So, and I remember telling my kids that. And then, and that's another, and I sit back and, I just have this revelation that just now, and I'm like, I can't even believe I told my kids that. Because, and in some ways it was condoning that it was okay for somebody to hit somebody.
Right.
And so, yeah, those are some very scary moments in my life.
Well,
time.
right. And so do you carry guilt from that?
I do. I do with my 9-year-old. I used to with my 14-year-old. My 14-year-old, I have been able to sit down and have a talk with him and explain to him, look, Mama was wrong. And, and I've always told him that when Mama's wrong, she'll admit she's wrong. And I've stayed true to that. And I told him, I sat down and I told the 14-year-old, that's not true. God wasn't punishing me. What happened should have never happened. God played no role in it whatsoever. And, as he started getting older, I started to tell him, that you got to think about things. If God had control over, what was going on in our lives, why would we go a couple of days without food? Why would we go those days without food and your daddy continuously beat me because I wasn't going out and getting money from somewhere when he was perfectly capable of going his own butt out there and getting a job and bringing home money? I said, why would God do that to us? Why would God allow, any children to starve. I said, better yet, forget me. Why would God put y'all through that if he's supposed to love us? And I said, what did y'all do as children that was wrong to where y'all had to be worried with your mom about not having food to eat or a roof over your head?
Right. And so was that confusing to them to have that sort of shift in messaging?
The 14-year-old, yes. The 9-year-old is starting right now. It's kind of he's at the confused stage. His confused stage is starting right now.
Gotcha.
So he's a work in progress, and because of who their daddy is, I have to handle it with kid gloves.
Right.
But the 14-year-old, he was a little confused because he's like, okay, Mom, you're teaching me this one thing, and then now you're telling me another. What's going on here? Or are you just having a change in your mind, and then you're eventually going to change your mind again? And it actually took Bobby sitting down and talking to him, because I was fairly new to all this. So I'm like, hey, I need some help here.
Right.
And so, Bobby just started presenting him with things to think about, and he would give him evidence to back up everything that he was saying. And Christian is an evidence type person. I didn't realize it at first, but he is an evidence type person, and he wants to see evidence too.
Gotcha. So he's kind of a natural skeptic.
Yes, he is. And I didn't know that about him. And I don't even know if he knew that until it was like, hey, wait a minute. You mean there's evidence to back all this up? And I think that's when he started to turn his way of thinking, when, he started realizing, okay, for example, we were talking about, not being a God. And he had made the comment one time, he was like, but Mom, what if there is one? What are we going to do then? And then, at the time, I knew what that was. I knew it was Pascal's wager.
Right, exactly.
So, and I'm like, okay, son, I'm going to explain something to you. What you just said, there is a fallacy for that. So then I had to explain to him what a fallacy was.
Right.
But once he learned that, oh my God, there's an actual statement for it's called something, he wanted to know more.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, he was like, okay, wait a minute. So then, at the time he was 13, sitting in my living room on a Saturday night, has a notebook out, and he's writing down every fallacy that he could find on the internet.
Oh, that rules.
And I'm sitting here thinking, most 13-year-olds are playing video games or talking on their cell phones or going, hey, Mom, can I go hang out here? Mom, can I go to the movies? No, what is my 13-year-old doing? He's sitting in the middle of the living room writing out fallacies and looking at me and Bobby going, okay, can you explain this to me? Well, explain what this means. So, and I thought that was just cool. As a 13-year-old, that's awesome.
Yeah, very much so. So, how do you talk to your kids about religion? So when you finally said, and obviously, it's, there's not like one defining moment where you snap your fingers and all of a sudden you're an atheist, but
right.
Once you recognize that fit and that you didn't actually believe in God anymore, did you kind of have to have a coming out to your kids about that?
The 14-year-old, yes. I think I haven't exactly come out and said, Christian, I don't believe in God. I don't believe there's a God. I haven't come out and exactly said that yet. He has pretty much put the puzzle pieces together.
Right.
The 9-year-old, like I said, he's at that stage right now where he too is, he's a little confused, but he's asking questions. For example, he walks around and goes, hey, Mom, do you know who made the sky blue? And I'm like, no, son, who made the sky blue? And he's like, God did it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I have to go, okay, well, I can't pull up the facts right now because I'm driving, but remind me of this when we get home, and I'll show you that God didn't make the sky.
See, and I think that's awesome, because one of the things that I always hear as is kind of a theme whenever there's a discussion about atheist parenting, the thing that strikes me so hard is that the question that everyone so when you hear fundamentalist religious parents talk about parenting, their number one concern is like, how do I make my kids the best Christians they can be?
Right.
And when I hear atheists talk about being good atheist parents, what they worry about is, how do I not indoctrinate my kid into atheism?
Yes.
Which I think is absolutely incredible.
You know what? I completely agree. There is one thing that I am starting to tell my 9-year-old, because he's kind of catching on to some of the conversations, but the 14-year-old, you know, when I told him that he's 14 years old, he has his own body, he has his own rights, he was like, what do you mean I have my own rights? You know, and I'm like, well, you can't technically go out and get a job and move out on your own.
Don't take this too far now.
Yeah. But I mean, for example, he wanted to get his ear pierced.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And he's like, and the old me was like, no, when you turn 18, then you can get an ear pierced. But the new me was like, this 14-year-old who is very mature for his age has decided that he wants to do this to his own body, and he has that right to do so.
Right.
And who am I to sit back? I mean, yeah, I'm his mom, but that doesn't mean that I sit back and, I mean, what's wrong with him getting his ear pierced?
Right.
Nothing.
You don't own your kid.
Right, exactly.
Which is apparently a super novel concept to some people. But
I tell right now, because Christian is, and I don't mind saying his name because a lot of people know him. He was on our show.
Oh, I remember. Yes. He was awesome.
Yes, I named my son Christian. You could tell what stage I was going through.
We'll let that one go.
But he's going through a stage right now. He had his father so high up on a pedestal, and literally I was the mud beneath my child's foot. And this was 4 or 5 years ago. I had worked for the past 4 or 5 years to at least gain some type of relationship with my son, because I cannot make my child love me.
Right.
I cannot make him want to be with me. I cannot make him listen to me. What I can do is I can speak to him. I can have a conversation with him. I can show him that I love him. And I don't know, ever since I started being more upfront with him and honest about things, he's done like a 180. And he advocates for the LGBT community. I mean, he goes to school, and if he sees somebody being bullied or picked on or anything, he's the first one to stand up and go, wait a minute, you can't do that.
It's amazing what a kid can do if you give them the message that this is a thing that they can do. Like,
yeah,
you are your own person. Like, obviously you're not a mature adult, so like you need guidance, but you know, that doesn't mean that you're worthless and useless. Yeah. And that like I own you. Like I try really hard to not have super strong opinions about parenting, because I'm not a parent, and the tiny little bit that I can put myself in a parent's head absolutely terrifies the crap out of me. So, you know, I try super hard to not have strong opinions about that kind of thing, because I don't ever want to dictate to someone else, like, you've been there for 14 years at this point. What the hell do I know?
Right. But on the same hand, Callie, you do have a parent.
Well, right. And that was kind of, where I was going. Like, when I grew up, my mom very much instilled the idea in me that, look, you are your own person. You've got a lot to learn, and you're not perfect, but you are your own person, and you're worthy of your own respect, and you have power of your own, and you have a mind of your own, and that's okay. And I think that's like, you know, if I could point to one thing that's, you know, why I am the way I am today, I really think it was because, I mean, I had that message drilled into me, and I think that's like the healthiest thing that you can teach a kid.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's one of the things that, when I started talking to Christian about the lack of a God and about humanism and about equal rights and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I told Christian, I said, I'm going to tell you something up front, and I'm going to be completely honest with you. I will teach you everything that I think you need to know. You have any questions, you come to me and you ask me. If I do not have the answer, I promise you, buddy, I'm going to find them. And I said, but once you gain that information, make your own decisions based on the information that you have received. Don't not believe in God because, Mama doesn't believe in God, so I'm not going to believe in God. Don't believe there is a God because you base that information off of the information that you've received.
Right.
And he's like, you mean I can do that? I'm like, yes, son, you can think for yourself. It's okay. You have that right. I'd rather him gather up all the information and then come up with his own decision instead of a decision being forced onto him.
I don't understand why that's not just seen as the sensible default position.
Well, it's kind of the reason why it's not, and especially down here in the South, is that because everybody was raised in a church.
Right.
The church that I attended 9 times and, was baptized 9 times in because, I'd be forgiven of my sins if I was baptized 9 times.
Wait. We have to rewind on that one a second. I'm not familiar with having to be baptized 9 times. Talk to me about that.
See. Okay, I was baptized as a child, 9 years old, because it was time for me to be baptized in the church.
Right.
That's what I was told. And that was the church that my great-grandparents went to, my grandparents went to, my mom went to, my aunt. It was the family church. And it's one of the oldest churches here in Savannah. And then I left the church and went to a different church. Well, in order for me to come back to the family church, I had to be baptized again. Because that was their way of accepting me back as a member of the church.
Gotcha.
So then I left again. I went to a different church. I stayed Baptist the whole time. Okay, I didn't go to a different denomination or anything. So after leaving 4 or 5 times, I'd come back, and there was always a reason why I had to be baptized again. To become a member again, or to wipe the dirty sins off of me from going to another church. Maybe I wasn't old enough at the time to accept the first, 6 baptisms that I had. And finally it came down to, are you ready to finally accept the Lord Jesus Christ as your Holy Father, whatever? And I'm like, yes, okay, dunked for the last time. And I left the church, and that was it.
Wow. I didn't know that was a thing. I just thought it was like, like when you're a kid, you're baptized, or like if you're not a Christian, like you get baptized when you become a Christian, and like that's like the symbolic thing. I guess it's different for each denomination.
Yeah, Christian, 4 years ago, he went to Vacation Bible School for the first time. That same week, he was baptized because everybody else was doing it.
Right. All the cool kids are getting baptized.
Yeah, how cool is it to be dunked in a tub of water,
Right.
Son, you want me to dunk you in a tub of water? Come on.
Right, yeah, there doesn't have to be a whole lot of ceremony. I'll stick your head under some water, like...
So, and it's so indoctrinated in us from our great-grandparents and their parents, that it's just like, what do you mean you don't go to a church? What do you mean? Just like I think I've stated it before, you come down here and it's, hi, I'm Ashley. What church do you attend? What member?
Right.
What member? What church are you a member of? That's like the first thing they want to know, your name and what church do you go to?
Yeah, I've had people introduce themselves to me like that. Like, my name's so and so from whatever church, and they'll identify themselves not only by the church that they go to, but who their pastor is.
Yes.
Like, I don't know, it's like they're in the military introducing themselves. Like, I'm from 5th Battalion, 3rd Platoon. And I don't know. Yeah, and that never really. I mean, I guess it makes sense because that's because humans are tribal creatures, and so that's like our tribe or whatever.
Right.
So, can I ask about your own parents?
Let's see. Well, my mother is Baptist. I could probably tell you, I think the last time she stepped in a church, I was, actually, let me put it this way. She actually attended a service probably when I was 16, maybe.
So like 4 or 5 years ago.
Yes. I love you. And then it was when my grandparents died when she stepped in the church again. So that's the extent of her church. My dad, I've never known my dad to attend a church. I've known my dad to be a member of a church, but never attended that church. And the only reason why I knew he was a member is because he used to get like newsletters and stuff from the church.
Gotcha. So have you had those discussions with your parents at all about not being religious anymore, about being atheist or anything like that?
Nope, not yet. My mother thinks that I'm still a Buddhist, and she called it a horseshit religion, which is probably about the most honest thing she ever said to me, which I didn't realize it at the time.
Right.
I mean, but she meant that is because, her Baptist religion is more important or better than Buddhism.
Right. So you can go back to like, Mom, what you said about Buddhism was right, believe it or not. But but so is yours. Right. I remember sitting, now here's the funny thing, because it seems as though whenever something bad happens, Mama finds God. So Mom... There's a shock.
Yeah. Mom got caught drinking and driving without a driver's license in an accident and fleeing an accident.
Yikes.
So not only did she find God, but she also found her daughter to help her get out of the situation. I'm actually proud to say it. I have 3 other brothers, and I'm probably the one who everybody runs to when they have a problem, because it's like, we need you to help us get out of it.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
So Mom calls me. She's like, I need you to go to court with me. I'm scared. And I'm like, okay, well, leave me your wallet and your keys when you go before the judge. But we were sitting in the waiting hall waiting on court to start. And, I'm sitting there and I'm reading Facebook. And it just so happened that I had an atheist page go across my Facebook, and Mom's sitting right next to me. And she's like, whoa, wait a minute. What was that? And I'm like, oh, this is such and such. And she's like, they're an atheist? And I'm like, yep, that's what it says right there. And she says, well, do you know what that means? And I looked at her and I said, do you know?
Good answer.
And she's like, well, I'm not really sure, but they don't exactly like God too much, do they? I'm like, well, if he existed, no, they don't like him too much. But being as there has been no evidence that he actually does exist, they don't exactly dislike him, because in order to dislike him, that means they'd have to believe in him. And she says, oh, so they don't have God in their lives. No, Mama, that's not what I said.
Because it was just so hard for her to compute that there were people who didn't think God was real.
Right. So then I started to realize, okay, my mother, who's 60-something years old, and I'm having a discussion with her about atheism, and I'm like, okay, I really need to, she's had this her whole 63 years of her life, so she's fully indoctrinated. She just doesn't go to church.
Right.
And, I'm like, okay, I have to step back and think, I need to handle her like I would handle my son. So I looked at her and I said, Mama, have you ever read the Bible? And she says, yeah, long time ago. Okay. Do you remember anything about the Bible, Mama? Well, there was Moses, and then there was Methuselah that lived a really, really long time. Oh, and Noah's Ark. I'm like, so that's the only thing you remember about it? Well, yeah, pretty much. I said, you do know that the Bible talks of treating women poorly, correct? Oh, yeah. I don't like that part about the Bible. So pretty much you don't like
well, that's
any
a good
part
start.
of the Bible. And then I looked at her and I was like, do you actually believe that there was a snake that talked? And I kid you not, she looked at me and she's like, well, I never thought about that.
Wow.
Yeah. And I said, guess what? They talk about a talking donkey too. I haven't made it to the talking donkey yet.
Right. You're getting there slowly.
Right. And I said, but apparently there was a talking donkey too. And I have a hard time believing that there was a talking donkey. And she says, yeah, come to think about it, I think they did talk about a talking donkey. I said, apparently they did. And she says, I never really thought about that. And I was like, maybe you should go get out the Bible that's the size of your kitchen table and read it.
Right.
And she says, yeah, I might have to sit down and do that one day. I said, right off the bat, there's 2 creation stories. Which one am I supposed to believe?
Right.
She says, what? No. I said, yeah. She says, I'm going to have to go look that up. I said, okay, go look it up. I said, also, do you know that technically I should not be sitting here supporting you in court trying to get you out of anything, that I should be sitting here and obeying you, and you should have never had to ask me to come down here. You should have just told me and I should have just done it. And if I didn't, you had the right to stone me. Well, I wouldn't do that. Okay. Well, just go read the Bible, Mama.
Right.
So I don't know if I've got my mama thinking. I don't know if it was just maybe too far over her head. Mama has a tendency to, she lives off the bottle.
Gotcha.
So if there's ever a time that my mother is even going to remotely think about anything, I think we have to sit on a courtroom bench.
Gotcha.
I just a year ago at Christmas, I just started talking to my dad again after, 12 years. He actually met my youngest son for the first time in December. When I was going through the abuse and everything, they all did not want any part of it. They felt like they shouldn't get involved, and that was my deal to work out, and they just didn't get involved in those type of things. Oh. So yeah. So I decided that I wanted to reach out to him, and I did. And I also found out at the time that Daddy was wanting to reach out to me. Me and my dad actually have a pretty good relationship now. I mean, he calls me every day, he checks on me, but he had made the comment the first week that we were together, and he was talking about my brother, and he's like, your brother thinks he's perfect, and there was only one perfect man that walked this earth, and it wasn't him.
Gotcha.
So that right there, I was like, okay, Dad's still a religious type person. So then apparently my stepmother enjoys stalking on Facebook. So she started noticing posts from Bobby's page about No Religion Required podcast, and she decided that she wanted to listen to it one day.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So I'm sitting there having a conversation with my dad about something. I don't know. We were probably talking about, he loves golf, so we were probably talking about golf or something. And then I hear my stepmom and Bobby having a conversation about the podcast, and Bobby's, she's asking questions, and Bobby's explaining it to her. And I don't know how far she listened into it. I have no idea. But I do know that ever since that day, my dad has not mentioned one religious thing to me, but he has never wavered away from disowning me. He, like I said, he still calls me every single day. If he hasn't heard from me, he'll call me, and if I can't call him right back, then he'll wait a few minutes and he'll call me back, because he's bound and determined he's going to talk to me.
Right.
And if I don't call him back within the hour, then he's calling my mom going, hey, have you talked to your daughter? So, I mean, it like I said, he hasn't wavered from, he doesn't love me any less. If anything, maybe he respects me a little bit more.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah. So I'm glad that I did, because I was worried about that, really, because, I mean, like I said, could I have gone the rest of my life without being in my daddy's life? Probably. But I don't know if I could let him pass away and us not resolve our issues.
Right. Yeah, I have a similar struggle with my dad. That's a different episode.
Tune in next week, folks.
Right. Well, Ms. Ashley, tell me where people can find you online. Tell me where people can find No Religion Required online.
Well, you can find us at noreligionrequired.com. We also have a Facebook fan page called No Religion Required fan page. We also have a group called No Religion Required fan page. Bobby normally does all this. But
sorry, not trying to throw you under the bus.
But you can also find us every Sunday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Spreaker, and you can also follow me, Miss Ashley, on Twitter at Miss_AshleyNRR, or you can find me on Facebook at Miss Ashley of NRR.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on the show and for sharing your story. I really, really appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome, Callie. You know I love you, and anytime you need me to come on or you want to just have a good old-fashioned chat, just call me.
Oh, I love you too. Thank you for that.
You're very welcome.
So we're going to take one more quick break here. When we come back, we're going to have an interview with my friend Dany and his mom, Charlene, and they're going to talk about their journey together through Dany's transition and what that's been like for them and what that's meant for their relationship as parent and child. The interview goes a little long, and I didn't intend for it to go that long, but it did, and it was amazing. And frankly, there's nothing in there that I feel comfortable cutting out. So the interview is going to be long, and that's okay. Take it in chunks, take it however you like, but it's all in there, and it's really, truly an incredible story. I have a lot of love and respect for both of them. Neither identify as atheist, and that's okay. That's not necessarily what we're here for. That's a secondary conversation, but I think their story is an important one and one worth sharing. So we'll have my interview with them coming up next on the Gaytheist Manifesto.
Here's an excerpt from Fear of Physics by Lawrence Krauss.
A physicist, an engineer, and a psychologist are called in as consultants to a dairy farm whose production has been below par. Each is given time to inspect the details of the operation before making a report. The first to be called is the engineer, who states,
"The size of the stalls for the cattle should be decreased. Efficiency could be improved if the cows were more closely packed, with a net allotment of 275 cubic feet per cow. Also, the diameter of the milking tubes should be increased by 4% to allow for a greater average flow rate during the milking periods."
The next report is the psychologist, who proposes the inside of the barn should be painted green. This is a more mellow color than brown and should help induce greater milk flow. Also, more trees should be planted in the fields to add diversity to the scenery for the cattle during grazing to reduce boredom. Finally, the physicist is called upon. He asks for a blackboard and then draws a circle. He begins.
"Assume the cow is a sphere."
This old joke, if not very funny, does illustrate how, at least metaphorically, physicists picture the world. The set of tools physicists have to describe nature is limited. Most of the modern theories you read about began life as simple models by physicists who didn't know how else to start to solve a problem. These simple little models are usually based on simpler little models, and so on, because the class of things that we do know how to solve exactly can be counted on the fingers of one, maybe two hands. For the most part, physicists follow the same guidelines that have helped keep Hollywood movie producers rich. If it works, exploit it. If it still works, copy it. I like the cow joke because it provides an allegory for thinking simply about the world, and it allows me to jump right into an idea that doesn't get written about too much, but that is essential for the everyday workings of science. Before doing anything else, abstract out all irrelevant details. There are two operatives here, abstract and irrelevant. Getting rid of irrelevant details is the first step in building any model of the world, and we do it subconsciously from the moment we are born. Doing it consciously is another matter. Overcoming the natural desire not to throw out unnecessary information is probably the hardest and most important part of learning physics. In addition, what may be irrelevant in a given situation is not universal, but depends in most cases on what interests you. This leads us to the second operative word, abstraction. Of all the abstract thinking required in physics, probably the most challenging lies in choosing how to approach a problem. The mere description of movement along a straight line, the first major development in modern physics, required enough abstraction that it largely eluded some pretty impressive intellects until Galileo.
Fear of Physics by Lawrence Krauss. Find this audiobook and many more at atheistaudiobooks.com. The facts you won't hear in church.
Welcome back to the Atheist Manifesto. Today we're talking about parenting and parent relationships. For this segment we have Dany, who is a trans man. And we have his mom, Charlene. And I've heard them tell their story several places and several ways, and I really loved it. So I invited them here on the show. So thank you both for joining me.
Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you for asking.
So Dany, let's start with you. Tell me a little bit about your story and how how you growing up, you realizing who you were, and all that sort of stuff.
I mean, I've known from first time I could think and remember thinking, I'm not a girl. I'm just not a girl, and I would express that in ways of screaming, "I'm a boy! I'm a boy! I'm a boy!" But growing up in the 90s, there wasn't a lot of understanding for a little girl saying, "I'm a boy." And nobody knew what transgender was. They called the community those transsexuals at that point. And it was very stigmatized. So Mom had no idea what to do with me because I hated dresses. And she wanted a little girl. But the problem was she didn't have a little girl. She had a little boy. So Mom always says from the time I was 4, she knew I was going to at least be a lesbian. She told my dad that I was playing with somebody, and she goes, I think Danny's going to be gay. Turns out that's the truth.
Right.
So, in saying I'm a boy, I rejected all girl clothing. I played with the boys. I played sports. Was rough and tumble. But, I still liked my Barbies, and I still liked playing with my baby doll. And there wasn't...
Stuffed animals, not dolls, really.
Rosie, the doll.
Yes.
The baby doll, yes.
Not
Rosie,
Barbies.
the baby doll.
You're not a Barbie kid. G.I. Joe, Soldiers of the World, not Barbies, ever.
Only thing with Soldiers of the World...
I was a Transformers kid.
Yeah.
Yep.
I found the Soldiers of the World kind of attractive, so they usually ended up naked and... Because I thought they were cute, because, I'm just queer like that.
Right.
And so I had a lot of trouble growing up. Obviously, school was hard because nobody freaking understood anything about that in school.
Right.
So they never noticed, hey, Danny's struggling with something. No, Danny's just a behavior problem.
And would you express that at school the same way you would at home?
Yeah. And I was told by my second grade teacher, quit playing with the boys or else you'll end up like one of those damn transsexuals.
Ugh.
Yeah. And of course, a 7-year-old, what the hell does that mean to a 7-year-old?
Right.
But it was a shooting down of what and I never talked to that woman about it again because I didn't trust her. And I was a very guarded child. Mm-hmm. Like, I was...
Well, because you had to be.
I had to be. But there was a lot of issues growing up queer. And Mom didn't know how to handle it. She did her best. But nobody knew what transgender was. Mm-hmm. So we would have knockdown dragouts in the department stores about dresses and clothes. And I'd say, Mommy, I want to go shop in the boys' department. And Mommy would go, no, you're going to wear this damn dress I picked out for you.
Now, it wasn't totally dresses because my mother was a tomboy. I was not for a variety of reasons.
I was not allowed to shop in the boys' department.
Right. I was okay raising a tomboy, but I said you can buy... in the girls' department, shorts, pants, things. You would think that I would have a wake-up call knowing that the boys' department clothing actually fit Dany better, and knowing even, well, going back to when he was a toddler and potty training, I always thought it's because he was a mimic and they had gender neutral at the daycare center. But to potty train him, we had to turn him around to sit down on the pot because he always wanted to just naturally straddle the commode. Mm-hmm. But again, I just thought he was very strongly identified. He loved my dad, very strongly, best friend. Had a very strong personality. My husband had a very strong personality.
That's an understatement.
Yes, so thought. And he was a great Mr. Mom. Mm-hmm. So Dany did go into men's bathrooms a lot when younger, and my husband was not afraid to change a diaper. He did complain in places because he didn't have changing tables in the men's bathroom.
Nice.
But Dany didn't, and if I wasn't able, then he took Dany, no question about it.
There was this one time I was in the women's restroom, and I couldn't reach the sink to wash my hands. So my dad, this woman said, who's her parent? Obviously her at the time. Mm-hmm. And my dad came in there and picked me up so I could wash my hands in the women's restroom. He was very, he was cool, but he had his eccentricities, if you would say.
Sure.
But he was a big leader on the AIDS forefront. He was a social worker. Back in the 80s, he really fought for people who had AIDS their rights. Mm-hmm. And he was one of my biggest supporters, both of my mom and my dad. I don't know what my grandfather would say about me now, because he was, military, all that good stuff. He loved his little girl, but...
Right, you never know. Sometimes you're surprised by people who you think are going to be totally okay and aren't, and people who you think are just going to be so hateful and not accepting and end up totally fine.
I think he'd be cool with me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But, school issues were a big thing, like fights, disciplinary issues because of the dysphoria.
And anxiety.
I hated being at school because, I was always called she. Nobody used the spelling that I wanted to use of my name. Mm-hmm. And it was just, I felt like I was living a lie.
Yeah, I always hated the feminine name. I thought it was that he hated Danielle, but it was really the femininity
of the name.
Right.
Like Daniel is, I love it. It's a good, strong name.
Right.
But
my co-host name is Daniel. I agree.
Yeah.
Well, if
he's a big burly bearded guy, so yeah.
If he had been born a boy, for what we knew, he would have been a Daniel. So.
Right.
Yeah. So when I was, by the time I was 14, I was up in Cincinnati, and I had gone to Children's Hospital I was admitted to psych. I'll be honest about it. Mm-hmm. Psychiatry was a big part of my life because struggling with yourself and struggling and not knowing how to get it out. I'd try to commit suicide because I felt so alone, and I'm sitting in the car at Kroger's with my mom and dad. We're sitting in where were we? Hamilton Avenue Kroger's. Mm-hmm. And we're sitting there, and I go, Mom, Dad, I have something I need to tell you. And Mom goes, yes. And I said, I think I'm gay. My mom looks at my dad, goes, give me high five, Ben, I got it right.
No, I said, I told you so.
Yeah, I told you so. And Dad goes, oh, okay, so what were you going to tell us? And I said, well, I'm gay. He goes, well, we knew that, so that's not any new news. You got anything new for us? And I'm like, wow.
What an anticlimactic coming out, right?
I know, I was expecting this thing like, you cannot be gay. No, it's...
Right.
So, you're gay. And then, I continued this habit of ending up in the psych ward because even coming out as gay wasn't who I was to the core.
It wasn't completely.
It wasn't completely it. And so when I was 19, I just got out of a relationship with somebody who was trans, and I realized that's me. I am trans queer. And so I looked at my mom one day and I said, you know how I like to be a boy? You know how I always said I wanted to be a boy? I am a boy. So, and she goes, okay, didn't see that one coming.
Right. Because, Danny was talking about the dysphoria and all that, and he had a lot of mental health issues, which I'm on a lot of parent transgender sites, and it's like everybody's writing the same story. And these are private sites for parents who are sharing their own difficulties where they can talk to people without having to show their emotions because they want to be highly supportive of their children. But we as parents have, I wrote on someone today, as a matter of fact, I think we parents have a harder time than our kids when they start the transition. The only thing that helps us is when we see how happy our kids are in the change. But Dany, I knew at 4 he was going to be, hands down, I knew he was gay. I can't, just mother's instinct, whatever. But, no phase one way or the other, had no concept because trans was not on my radar. But he started his suicide attempts at age 4, and then cutting came as a teen. But I always thought, in children normally, and when you have a little education, it can be a good thing and a bad thing. But there is a normal process for all children where they go through an envy of the opposite sex, and it's not abnormal. So I would just rationalize a lot by saying, oh, Dany's in that phase. That's what we're going through. But it persisted. Yeah, right. It persisted so consistently that it confused me, and it just his dysphoria, his suicide attempts, and I should have, the should-haves, whatever, the clues you miss. When his suicide attempts young, he would always tell, and we had him in therapy young, because we obviously, I have a psych background, my husband in social work. We obviously believe in therapy and in how it helps if you find the right therapist. But, God, I lost my train of thought. Some timers came in, but he would say when he committed suicide that he wanted to, or tried to commit suicide, that he just wanted to go to sleep, and sleep was always an issue because of the high anxiety, no matter what anybody did to help the anxiety levels. He'd wake up and he'd be fixed, and everything would be all right.
And this is where my issue with God comes in. Because I would always pray to God, if you love me and you really care about me the way you say you do, tomorrow I'll wake up with a penis. And every morning I'd wake up and there was no penis. So I grew a distaste for organized religion and their concept of higher power. But these days, I'm more agnostic and spiritual, but Judaism is my cultural background, and I love the culture. I don't necessarily agree with everything. And so when I came out to Mom, she told me, I said, you know how teenagers are. It's like, I want everything now. I want my top surgery, I want my teeth, and I want my name changed, and damn it, I want the gender marker changed.
But we have to back up a little bit, too, because his dad he was disabled and had spinal cord damage, and it progressed, and he got very ill in 11. Before Dany came out as trans, and he did die in September of 11. So I lost my sounding board for one. And Dany's pushing all of this new stuff because I said, I'm not fighting anymore. Okay, there's a place for Dany within. And we got involved. Dany got hooked into, and thank God for GLSEN, and thank God for HRC. HRC, what Jonah?
Heartland Trans Wellness.
Heartland Trans Wellness.
And Jack Stringer and Jonah Yokoyama.
Right. Wonderful. They helped educate, because obviously when you have a kid who doesn't drive, you're going and
youth summits.
Yeah, and going to the youth summits and the information there. And of course, I would volunteer for GLSEN Prom.
She was the best chaperone at GLSEN Prom.
Well, whatever. It was a learning curve for me, and I was grateful for the opportunity, but I was also grateful for the educational experience I got, particularly with the youth summit that GLSEN does every year, and had no idea, because the Trans Clinic at Children's is just 2 years old.
Wow,
but
amazing.
I went into the sessions when Dany had his former boyfriend. That's when he hooked up with the Trans Wellness Group, and that was the start of the education. So I just looked at Dany and said, quit pushing. I need time to think. I said, Dany, this is big for me as it is for you. And the only thing I can say about parenting, and Dany has not doubted, even though there are times I want to strangle him and hang him by the rafters myself.
By the toenails.
Yeah, no, by the rafters, kid. Any rate, I love him dearly, and I think, and he knew he was loved. He didn't always like his parents,
but I always loved him.
But he always, we knew he always loved us, and I really think he knew we always loved him, and it was really special because I don't know if you know or not, Dany is adopted. So he was a real gift to Ben and I, particularly because it came late in life for both of us. And but he was a very difficult child, and all of this anxiety and mental health issues in school. And I worked for the school system. It was a real trying. Dany could try the patience of 10 saints at the same time. But
it's true.
It was interesting growing up, but I said, you've got to give me my time. And I had to do a lot of soul searching because I said, why is this bothering so much? And I keep saying, trying to read. At this point, I didn't know anything about the trans clinic. I didn't know anything about the websites at all. Just starting to learn a little bit about what trans, I mean, in my denial, I said, oh, it's just because you had a trans boyfriend, that's why you want to be trans. I mean, you know, Mom's denial was tremendous because I always wanted a little girl. And when the opportunity to adopt, here, you're going to have a little girl. And I had a little girl. No. But I didn't conceive of that initially.
And if we could, let's kind of start over a little bit. So that kind of brings us up close to now with your story, Dany. So Charlene, talk me through the times in childhood you guys were talking about where where Dany was, yelling, I'm a boy, and all of these things. What's going through your head as a parent while these things are happening?
One, I thought it was because Dany always had fantastic athlete. Any sport Dany could try, he could beat almost any kid in the neighborhood, whether it was baseball, tremendous sprinter, fabulous soccer player, was goalie, coach, and referee, youngest in the state, as a matter of fact. Did very well
with
in
referee
anything.
certification.
And, I mean, he was one of the youngest kids who could climb the rope in gym to go up to the ceiling.
I never was able to do that.
To do these stone walls. When we took him to Huntsville to the Space Center, there was only one other person who was an adult who made it to the top of the most difficult. At age 10, Dany made it to the top of the most difficult. Age is not as important. He was young, and he made it. And they're just mouths are open. As a matter of fact, everybody stopped climbing any of the other walls to just watch this little billy goat go up the hill. Just tremendous ability that way. Always pursued more, loved science and history. Did not like the more prissy side of being female, lacy side. At 15 months, there was a very definite change in Dany to not want a lot of feminine things. It was so funny, and you would have thought, I mean, his room was blue because blue is my favorite color. His naming dress was blue. That's how neutral. I didn't care what color, but I did care about the more feminine side of the tomboy clothes because I thought that was identity. But I let him dress as a tomboy. I thought it's because he wanted to fit in with the boys, and he wasn't into dolls. He loved baby dolls and his stuffed animals and all of that. But
Hot Wheels.
And Hot Wheels and riding his bike and doing those kinds of things. And I just saw that more as basically gender neutral. I mean, society thinks of it as a tomboy, but I just thought it was a very athletically gifted kid. And I think school would have gone a lot better because educationally, sometimes for very bright kids, you delay a year if they're a boy and you put them ahead. And Dany really developmentally, Dany was day one, whether he could voice it or not, I believe Dany was born a boy in a girl's body, because looking back and analyzing, you can see how he followed the developmental pattern. And I'm in schools, and I grew up, and I'm old enough to be a bi-gender society, so I don't want to offend anybody, but you can see that there are some educational differences. There are developmental, physical differences as well, but also in terms of learning and readiness and all that. He was mentally bright, but he wasn't really ready for school, but they put him ahead. He started at age 4, where if he had been a boy, I would have delayed. I think some of the social would have happened a little easier. But, I mean, and we had the rule that if it was going something with Grandma and Grandpa and it was fancy, or a family function like a wedding or bar or bat mitzvah, had to be, and also going to services, because I was still of the age where you wore a skirt or dress. I felt uncomfortable myself in pants. So Danny's always been a pleaser and wanted to please me. So under duress, he did that, and Dany was
great duress.
Bat mitzvah, and did wear a suit when he went to hit.
Tears were shed.
Yes, got him a dress so he could attend parties, but wouldn't last his anxiety. And I never realized now his anxiety was probably because he was so uncomfortable being a girl at these parties. But who knew? Who knew? I didn't know, and I don't know that I would have known at that point if I'd had enough education, maybe. But I liked the denial because I really wanted a little girl, and I remember the little girl who would sit at the floor by my feet and I got plastic makeup because he liked to mimic what Mommy was doing, getting ready for work. Which really shouldn't be gender specific. It was just mimicking Mom if you look back on it. But It was hard. It was very confusing for me. And when I looked back and when I said, Dany, give me time, I have to think about this, I finally, one day, the epiphany, it hit. I said, I know what it is. I'm losing, because it came out of my mouth. I said, leave me alone. I'm losing my daughter. And then I said, oh my gosh, that's where my resistance to your transitioning is coming, is I'm losing my daughter. But of course, at that point, it helped that I'd already been to the seminar, had met June Hill's Camp, and Jonah, who did Trans 101, but not just Trans 101. I'd sat in the year before with Jack Springer, but this was for Children's Hospital and promoting the program because they had just started it, and I actually didn't realize, but I had met Dr. Connard at that one, didn't know till later.
And for reference, Jack Stringer and June Hill's Camp, they're part of Heartland Trans Wellness, which I've talked about on the show before. I'll put a link to their website in the show notes. And Dr. Connard runs the Children's Hospital Trans Clinic at Cincinnati Children's Hospital, and I don't even know if they have a website, but if I do, I'll put that in the show notes. Sorry, go ahead.
Children's Hospital Trans Clinic does, I believe, have a link or whatever. I don't know if it's the Facebook page.
Yep. I'll make sure to link that in the show notes.
Tremendous people. All those people, tremendous. And I said, that's what my issue is. So I sat Dany down, and we do a lot of talking, a lot of sharing. And I said, Dany, I just realized you're going to have to let me grieve. This is very difficult for me. And I said, we're going to do this as a progress because I need time. Too much is happening in a short period of time for me. You have always wanted things yesterday. I don't roll that way, and I'm still struggling. You know, we've lost your dad. This is not where I thought I'd end up. We have a lot of other issues. My mom at that point was not stabilized with blood pressure. I said, I cannot handle this stress. Give me a break. So let's have a plan. And God bless Dany. He let me have my plan. I said, okay, kid, first step, I'll let you do the name change. And we talked about it, and I begged, because Dany was trying out a lot of different names. And that was the weird thing. Dany, every 2 weeks, had a different name he wanted to use and whatever. I said, look, kid, if you were a boy, you were going to be Daniel anyway, and we all love the name. What is your problem with Daniel versus Danielle? He said, nothing. I said, okay, it will make it easier for me because you will always in my heart. I said, I know you're always Dany, so if I can still call you Dany, that makes it a little easier to accept the change and less painful in a way.
And I love the name Dany.
Yeah, and you have to give up dreams. For me, it was, you don't have a wedding, I said, Dany, you realize when we travel, we don't share a bed anymore. You cannot be in my rooms when I'm getting dressed or bathroom or anything else, because we're fairly open. If it's a female household, you don't, I don't think anything of it.
It's pretty much a sorority.
Yeah.
Right.
But I feel a little differently being an adult woman with an almost adult son.
Right.
It's just very different for me. I don't know if I was a new I don't know if I would ever change whatever generation. It's just I think in the binary.
No,
I think
hear
it's
you.
more appropriate.
And I think I think that's that's something that I tell people a lot when people come to me and and they're struggling with their gender identity and coming out and stuff like that. That's something that I tell people a lot is like, this is something, even if you've been in denial, denial was like my specialty before I came out. But still, to some degree, it was something I'd been wrestling with almost my entire life. For my family and friends, it was, oh my God, I just found out about this and I don't even know what the word transgender means.
Right.
And I had lots of those same conversations with my friends and family. Like, I feel like I'm losing one friend and being forced to accept this other friend who kind of looks and sounds like my old friend. And to some, it's a lot of it's fear of the unknown, I think, because, I had people ask me, are you going to go on hormones and become a different person? And at that point, I'm like, I don't know. I might. I don't want to, but
some of the things, because of some of the overlapping mental health issues, there was a fear of what the behavior would be on T. The shock of all shock for everybody.
T for testosterone, by the way.
Is that Dany calmed down.
Right.
Dany had nowhere near the reaction that they thought, and I said, oh, okay, this is a very interesting kind of thing. But what I also didn't want, and Dany and I have had a lot of conversation, is to not wipe out the past, because your past is still your life. And there is a picture on the mantle from Dany's bat mitzvah, which is what you do for a girl, for a boy you do bar. But it's the only picture that I have with her dad and my dad. It was the last one where they were both alive. My dad died the next year, and then her dad died 5 years later. And it's the only family. My brother and his wife are in there, and my mom and dad and Dany, Ben, and I. So it's the only really family, and I don't look at it so much as Dany, but that was a very special moment for my dad, even more than Ben and me. So please, Dany, let's not delete everything away.
Or be history revisionist.
Yeah,
right.
Revisionist. And it helped because then when I would stumble over pronouns, what I realized I was doing, talking the past, I was using she because Dany was she. And then I moved away, and now I can pretty much do he for past, except when we have to do medical stuff.
Right.
That's the hard part, especially in the hospital. But children's was wonderful. Didn't have to switch pronouns back to.
And I registered for college as male.
Yeah, and they
awesome.
let him.
There was no questions asked.
Yeah.
They saw my ID, it says female. Because I haven't gotten the gender marker change, but there was no questions asked about, are you a girl or are you a boy, or do you prefer not to stay? That wasn't even on there.
Right. And they didn't care because his driver's license ID still says female, although it has, because we did the name change and I got the new birth certificate, but I was so afraid to change gender marker because of health insurance.
Right.
And, there, for women particularly, there are very definite health issues. And
if you're male, they
wellness,
don't let you get those checks.
Right.
Yeah, you don't. The wellness.
Why
checks
does a man need a gynecologist visit?
Right.
That kind of thing.
Exactly.
What are you going to do with the pap smears?
And the mammograms, and those are very, very important exams that we fought hard to get paid for.
Right.
They would do a prostate exam for a male, hands down, but we had to fight to get our mammograms free,
of course,
and our pap smears free. So
misogyny is just wonderful, isn't it?
Yes,
right.
It is. So that was why we delayed also, and until Dany really started presenting. But when he went on T, it was unbelievable. I would say that 95% 5% of his anxiety went away.
Yeah.
I didn't have an anxious child anymore in any way, shape, or form. And he just had top surgery in June, and I have never,
Check it out.
ever seen a happier child. I've never seen my child.
By the
so
way, if you want a
happy.
good surgeon, Ann Schwenker at Children's is fantastic.
But you have to be over 18. There's someone else
Be
who
over
does
18
under
and
18.
under 24.
Yes, but there's someone else there who does the unders. So
Danny,
whatever.
talk to me about being on T and what that just what that's done for you generally. Because I mean, like obviously this is audio, so my listeners can't see your face. But God, I just saw you light up.
It's fun growing hair in weird places, you know, and smelling like an alpaca farm.
Talk a little closer to the mic if you can.
Okay, you know, I smell like an alpaca farm when I don't put on deodorant. So, and hair seems to sprout out where you don't realize you could have hair. But it is the most wonderful thing because, okay, this is weird, but I had dysphoria around the top of my legs.
Trust me, TMI does not exist on this show.
Good.
We are far beyond that at this point.
The top of my legs, my thighs never had hair. And about 4 or 5 weeks ago, I noticed that I am a hairy beastie on my thighs. And I'm like, yes, because it was a source of dysphoria for me because my lower legs could grow hair, but I was bare on my thighs.
It was like another thing that reminded you that you were different.
Yeah. And I just, no anxiety. They thought I would get violent on T and aggressive. And that, no, if anything, I got less aggressive and more peaceful.
And so what's that done for your relationship with your mom?
Oh, well, me and Mom are very close. We have the most TMI conversations you'll ever hear.
He can still be a pill. But that's normal.
But I mean,
Right.
There's a difference
It's
between...
not a perfect relationship, please,
Listen,
God.
listen. There's a
Not
difference
perfect.
between taking tea and becoming calmer and a bloody miracle.
Right,
I'm ornery.
right, I hear you.
I'm ornery. We know this.
Right,
Yes.
right.
And a slob.
It's true. She can say it. It's true.
Yes.
But me
Just
and Mom
another male
get-
stereotype to fit, right?
Right. But me and Mom get along great. I mean, there are times when we go back and forth, but it's usually over my room and me not picking stuff up or being lazy. And, you know, me and Grandma, she doesn't, you know, pronouns are not good with Grandma.
91 years old, it's a little hard to
Right.
Yeah, she
Right.
doesn't understand, but the weird thing was when I look like a girl, she called me a boy. Now that I look like a boy, she calls me a girl, so...
But also there's been some cognitive decline and some other decline.
But
because
Grandma's a
of the stroke.
bestie.
Right.
Yeah.
She
So-
accepts me. I mean, when she's on the phone with family members, it's, do you know what my grandson did the other day?
Right.
But she just can't call me he to my face.
Right.
Well, it flips, and I think it's because
Mm-hmm.
her mind flips.
Sure, sure.
So there,
Grandma's cool.
It's not because she wants to misgender him.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that on any given day, the recall button is coming from a different place.
I have made a point in surrounding myself with positive people and cutting out negative people from my life.
That's so huge.
Yeah, it is. And family, you know, I stay away from some of my family.
Dany has gotten so much more mature. I mean, there has been a definite maturity jump since the T and the surgery, and really being more cooperative to where Dany is much more helpful and
Less
more
ornery.
age appropriate. And I think it's more, you know, I call it the irritable baby syndrome, and I don't care if you're 5 months old or if you're 95 years old. We all, when we don't feel well, get irritable or cranky or tired. You know, there's a crankiness there.
Sure.
But that's it more than anything else. It's not the other stuff that we all kind of feared. And his psychiatrist is pleased as pie. She's never seen Dany smile and be so happy. So
Nice.
it's a real, no one has. It's just been a marvelous. And of course, as a parent, you kick yourself. What took me so long? You know, I
don't blame her.
It took the time it took.
Well,
But-
and you know, I think it's hard because I mean, I go back and forth with my grandma on this because, you know, is my grandma being a bad person, or is she being a product of her upbringing, or is it both? Or, you know what I mean? Because there's no doubt in my mind that she honestly, truly loves me.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But there's part of her that will never, ever accept me as Callie. And part of me can blame her for that. But part of me is like, well, she has the same cultural conditioning that we all do, and maybe even more because she's almost 80. So I can't really hold her completely responsible for that.
Right.
But you've also got to understand there's a certain mindset, but it's also a certain thing when your family or you have a very close relationship. Most family members do look at the eyes. You're seeing the person. The person inside yourself, whatever you want to call it to be, hasn't changed. So depending how strong you are cognitively to remember the pronoun shift, and I'm taking this from my own experience, I flip back because there are some days that I see my little girl Dany when I look at Dany, because it's a word, it's a phrase. To physically look at Dany, totally, I have no problem because
I'm a dude.
He's a dude. He looks like a dude.
Right.
Everything else. One of my fears was because since my husband is gone, how to help Dany learn how to be a male. He's living in a house with females, and there are certain there's different syntax, different speech patterns, there's certain that would help Dany pass, because whether we want to believe it or not, trans is on the cusp. It's where the overall gay community used to be maybe even 20 years ago for acceptance. Mm-hmm. And there was an underwritten thing. Yes, you could be, well, even if you work, you wear many hats. You know you behave a certain way when you're at work, and you can cut loose and be something different with your friends and something different at home with your family. And sometimes it's the same and sometimes it's not, particularly when you're doing a work role, because it's just the role and the hats and whatever, depending what community you work in. And to be able to teach Dany that, because physically Dany now can pass. But every now and then I hear the phrasing in his voice. I can hear the phrasing and sometimes behavior, because we had a certain play, give and take as a mom and kid. But it pulls me back into the days when I saw Dany as a little girl versus, oh, wait a second, in my head, moms and sons don't act that way and play that way. So that's still a hard part and an issue. And of course, his voice has gone from soprano to bass when he sings. And
that's another good part of T.
Oh my gosh, I was sitting in my bedroom and I heard Dany and my mom talking, and I must have dozed or something. I said, Who's here? Who's here? I did not recognize my own child's voice. And, as a mother, you can pick your own child out of a cacophony of a kindergarten class or a daycare.
You can probably pick them up just by the way they walk.
Well, no. Without seeing them, you can hear your child's laughter and their cry. It's just like moms who recognize hungry cry versus tired cry versus something's hurting.
It's like an instinctual thing.
There's something, it's just an instinct in there. And so that's been an adjustment for me too. But to say every now and then you do miss.
Right.
And I can say that because I've gotten validation. I'm not the only parent that feels that way. Mm-hmm. And it makes me feel really good that I'm not the only parent that feels that way.
Right.
Because it's a lot of giving up of dreams. Your dreams are just blossoming now. We've had to say goodbye to a ton of dreams and then get new dreams. But it's really scary because as a mother, I fear for my child, and mothers and dads of trans kids fear for their children in today's world.
Right.
So in a way, I feel more protective of Dany than I ever did, because you worry.
Yeah.
And of course, my bias is I think Dany has an easier time walking into a man's bathroom than it would be sometimes for a trans woman to walk into a woman's bathroom. But I mean, it's obvious, Dany. Nobody really knows, and I'm so glad so many men sit down on the commode. It's great.
I had a funny story. I was at conference, a trans conference, and there was a cisgendered male doctor talking, and he's a prominent bottom surgeon, and somebody said, does having this organ, does this make me male? He said, listen, he said, you don't need to stand to pee. Plenty of men sit on the toilet. I'm cisgender, white, straight, and I sit on the toilet. Because he was talking about how they don't he doesn't like to reroute the urethra. Mm-hmm. And it was, it's something, it's an interesting concept because, as a trans man, I feel, I want to be as masculine as possible. But there are some things that people see as masculine that, they're really not.
Right.
And they're not.
Well, and so much of that is subjective.
It is. It totally is.
I do that the same, like, I'm a woman. What does that mean?
Right.
Well,
Right. And it was just like, for me, it was a realization. I don't need a penis to be a man. And I don't need to stand to pee to be a man. And I don't need not saying you, but I'm just saying in general, I don't need everybody else's.
Yeah.
Right. Like, why does it matter what you think of me? It's what I think of me.
Right.
And if I say I'm a man, I'm a man. And it doesn't matter what the other person thinks. I'm a man, and I know that for myself, that I am a man, and there's no doubting that. And I don't need to stand to pee or have a penis to prove it.
Right.
Just a thought.
So,
and there's a website I'm on, and I have to put in a plug for parents.
Yeah, please
I joined
do.
it in
and
February.
I'll put it in the show notes, too.
It's a private group, so I can't. But I'm just saying, when I joined the group, you have to know someone to get in, and it's
sure.
It's around
it's for transgender
But
parents.
if those folks in Cincinnati who want to join, get in touch with Sarah Painter, who is the social worker for the trans clinic, and she can get you onto there is a Cincinnati Children's Hospital trans parents group, and there's an Ohio group, and it boomerangs from there. I thought I was actually signing up for children's, and somehow I got hooked up. I'm on an international website. And
which that one isn't secret. That one is closed, but you can get into it.
But at any rate, I just can't promote these over the radio. But we were 500 when I joined in February. We're approaching 2,600, or I think we may have just hit 2,600 from February to now.
Yeah.
And it amazes me with the parents who are dealing with much younger and these kids, and because there's so much out there now, they can be more. They're more aware, so they're more accepting, and they understand trans exists as a word. It's only those who are older parents, and a lot of the older kids who've just come out, it's because they're Dany's age, the 20 or above, because trans really
in the 90s
wasn't on the radar.
Right.
Dany was born in 92.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't on the radar, and certainly in Georgia it wasn't on the radar. And even here,
Georgia.
think about it, the trans clinic is only 2 years old. So where was the education and being?
Right.
It's almost like
it
you
just came out.
had to know. It's like you had to learn how to maneuver the group, because, again, you have to be careful sometimes who you... I mean, take it away from the gay and the trans. We have to be careful who we tell we're Jewish. You know,
right. Mm-hmm.
there's. I mean, it's a reality. I wish it were not that way, but it is a reality. And to help our kids, but I think parents who love their kids and who are not hooked into a specific belief pattern, what I see more happening, it's because of those whose picture of the world has suddenly changed, or those people who are very rigid in a belief structure. But if you're not, your kid's your kid. Mm-hmm. You love your kid. It's just a very difficult, scary process. We don't live anywhere near family, so we've told families. So I can't tell you if family would be supportive or not supportive.
Well, I've had cousins unfriend me on Facebook because I came out as trans. And Mom posted this thing on Facebook when I told her it was okay to come out for me on Facebook to tell the family and friends. And we had people drop, not me. Unfriend. Like my 2 of my cousins unfriended me, and I got a lovely note from one of them calling me all sorts of horrible names. And then I had another cousin just flat out refuse to accept my friend request with a message saying what an abomination I was. So that's my experience with the cousins.
Right.
But I'm grateful that Dany has grown in inner strength and is able to weather that. Now, if we lived in the same town, I don't know. But we don't, so we don't have to really cross that bridge. And so far, the people we know, our neighbors,
everybody's cool.
But have been very supportive, just nonchalant.
Even the people in my 12-step program are supportive, and they've known me since before I transitioned.
They just have trouble with the pronoun. They don't see Dany every day.
Well, they don't see me every day. They see me every Monday.
Right.
And that's it. But my sponsor is struggling with it. Because I was his little girl.
Right.
And sorry, I'm not your little girl. I'm your little boy, I guess. I don't know.
Right.
I'm your sponsee who is now a boy.
Right.
And
Junior dude.
Yeah, he calls me Junior.
Junior dude. I like that.
Well, this guy, he's amazing. He's a great sponsor, has helped me through a lot of my stuff. And the first thing he does when I come in after chest surgery, and he goes, "You didn't save me one?"
So speaking of top surgery, let's talk about that for just a second. Because I feel like I'm probably a little bit more open into talking about surgery and stuff than a lot of people are.
I'm very open about it.
It's a private thing, obviously, and you don't want to go around asking a trans person about their genitals. But I also think it's important. It's important to tell that story as a medical necessity, and this is not just something like, oh, I want to have a vagina because I want to have sex. It's not.
Right.
It's not about that.
Right.
So Charlene, as a parent, when Dany came to you and said, "This is a thing that I want," was there a visceral reaction to that? Were you resistant at first, or was this kind of when you'd gotten past that?
No, it was kind of past. No, I knew it was coming down the road. To me, to be able to pass, because Dany was well endowed, shall we say, a size I. Oh my God, biggest trust they worked on. I had no qualms. I had always, we started with a gynecologist outside of children's, and we had already talked about mastectomy for health reasons, because that size, tremendous back pain, balance issues, and Dany has a collagen disorder, which made the breast tissue drop and flow. So he was a 4-hour surgery, and his incisions are longer than normal for most people. But to me, it had to be a necessity, because to pass in society, to be externally accepted, because you're going to have strangers, you're going to have friendly acquaintances. Not everyone's in your inner circle. So to have the initial acceptance so people can learn who you are and get past the hump to get to know you. We are a visual society. I don't care whether it's bi, gender, or whatever we are, and we take what we see. And to not create the confusion, that was one thing. Plus, Dany had such tremendous dysphoria, hated his breasts, hated it. Of course, I couldn't blame him because of the size. But
no binder would work.
I had to make sure, because one of the first clinics we had to get him in, I had to find out from his Ehlers-Danlos doc what it meant to have that surgery, because you're always afraid. She said, well, no muscle tissue, so it's a fairly safe one for him to have. I said, great, that's okay. But I just don't like surgery. I was very nervous. So one of the parents on the website turned me on to a trans health clinic in Philadelphia the month before it was happening. And it happened to be 10 days before his surgery. It was the beginning of June.
It was the conference.
So I said, we're going, kid, because I looked at the sessions, and a lot of it was related to surgeries, medical, hormones, that kind of stuff. And it was for various ages, but mostly Dany's group. And I'm so glad. Best thing I could have ever done.
And you're talking about the Philly Trans Health Conference, right?
Yes.
Which is like
Philly,
the biggest trans health conference in the U.S.
Fantastic experience. And what was fun to watch is, and of course I'm straight and I'm not with the little kids and the parents, so I'm walking around going sessions. And the first day, everybody looks at you kind of nervous, askance. You can feel the tension in the air. At the end of the conference, so laid back, easy, just nobody cares, gives a rip about anybody or who you are or not are. So it was incredible. It was nice for me to meet some of the parents of the younger kids, and Dany made some contacts of kids
lasting friends as well.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
But he met this doctor, and he went to several surgical sessions. And the doctor happened to be on the board that certified Dany's surgeon. He knew Dany's surgeon. He said, she's not going to know me because she didn't meet me, but I've seen her work. I had to stamp it to give her certification to do this surgery.
Wow, how reassuring.
Yes, and he said, she is top-notch, and she knows her Ehlers-Danlos because there's a different way to stitch the incisions to make sure they don't spread
he
or
was
split. And you
very positive about her.
Yeah, very complimentary. I said, thank you. It was worth this whole drive up here.
Just to hear that.
Because we came back, and the next day we had to go for pre-op, and the next day was surgery.
Right.
So, we had a very short window to do this, and I was so grateful that we had done that, because that was my only concern, was the surgery, and the surgeon was new to children's, and I didn't know the surgeon anyways, and she did a beautiful job. Oh,
These
my
are gorgeous.
God. And Dany said, so you have to go get your bear.
I got to get the bear.
I'll be back. I love children's. They let you take stuff into loveys. They call them loveys. And Dany had thyroid cancer at 14. So his first surgery, he was 14, and he got this dog that now has been his hospital dog. So every surgery, every hospitalization, this dog has gone with.
Oh, my God, that's adorable. Can I take a picture of that to post on our Facebook page? Okay.
Yes, the doctor bound his chest because Dany was in a binder and to protect after the surgery. And the doctor did the same thing to the dog. But I went to Build-A-Bear because we love Build-A-Bear and got Dany. We had decided that Dany's birth date for It's a Boy was going to be the date of his surgery. So got him a baby blue bear and had it embroidered with his name and the date of the surgery with It's a Boy on the top.
That's so cool. And I'm going to post. I just took pictures, so those will end up on the Facebook page.
And brought that into Lovey, Joey the dog, went into surgery. He could only take one. And when he was in recovery, I brought in the blue bear, and that stayed at the hospital.
That's amazing.
The whole time he was there.
So that leads us to a good place here. So talk about where you are today and what the future looks like for both of you. I mean, either of you feel free to jump in on life and on in particular your relationship as parent and child.
Life is beautiful. Life is fun, and me and Mom are just living it. Mom's going to be a college girl because I don't drive, and she has to take me to Middletown twice a week, to go to college. So
along with downtown.
So
Every
it just
day.
This whole experience has just increased our relationship.
He will learn to drive, but no, he has
At some
point. He has epilepsy, so he has to be 6 months seizure free. And we thought he was going to make it when we got him his permit, and he didn't make. He was 6 months free, and then he had the seizure again.
Right.
But next step is he learns to drive, so Mama doesn't have to sit in these buildings for an hour waiting for a class. But I'm going to leave him downtown. We did coordinate. He let me set the schedule so that he can stay down there and Mom can come home or go grocery shopping or do something.
And the other cool thing is we're coming up on my hysterectomy pretty soon, which I'm very open to sharing about my surgical stuff. I think it needs to be shared. and it's a medical necessity.
I think it's important to talk about because people have the idea that it's just about sex or sexuality, and it's really about number one. And I mean, maybe partially is about that for some people, but what it really is about is being comfortable in your own body.
The bottom dysphoria is terrible, and it's just like,
but not because of the shape or the organs or having.
No, Mom, it's because
I
hate vaginal
periods.
sex. I'm not really fond of sex anyway, but I cannot do it because it is so the thought of having children gives me dysphoria. Carrying a child, I want to be a dad, but the thought of having a child in me just gives me dysphoria. And the thought of having sex in that way just it rips me apart. And
having
periods. It's so emasculating, and I can't handle it. So not only is this psychologically necessary, but I feel like as being the man that I am, it is physically necessary for me to get these organs out because I cannot stand to have another 98-day period.
Well, what was interesting is when he was on Depo-Provera, which is a shot to stop periods, there was no bottom dysphoria. But Depo fights T, so you have to go off Depo when you reach a certain level on T, and they hope that the testosterone will stop the periods. Well, not in everybody, folks. And he's always had difficulties anyways with that, and very heavy menses, and it's just been very difficult. And since getting off the T and the Depo, the next step is an IUD, and then they even had to go to a medication to try and stop the bleeding, which eased it a bit, but it's like every other day he has breakthrough. So it's like it is maddening, and the dysphoria had gone away because he was just so happy in the chest surgery.
Oh, just
now
wonderfully.
I'm
still happy.
Now, though, the dysphoria has come back with a vengeance, and it's shaken confidence level. Am I really a boy? Because I hear it every day, every night. Mom, do I have boobs? Dany, you're flat as can be.
I'm just so happy. Like, my life, except for the bottom dysphoria, is just so wonderful, and our relationship is great.
Moving in the right direction, and that feels good.
We're moving in the right direction.
And Mom's ready to launch, although I'll hold him back on the dating issue because now he's starting college, and that means focusing on getting school done.
She's afraid I'm going to hook up is the thing.
And I remember,
so it's just normal college kid stuff,
right?
Yeah, but I've known many a college kid that goes down the tubes because of hookups and the angst and all of that gets in the way.
No, I'm focused on school. It's time to it's time to fly like a bird.
Yeah, and I've been married more than once, and you grow and you learn, and it doesn't matter what age you get married, and you change anyway. So who you are at 20 is not who you are at 30, and the be-all and end-all in life is not a relationship. It's having the relationship that's right for you and someone that is worthy of you and loves you and respects you, and that's very important. And sometimes younger, and in today's world, and this is me, soapbox preachy, we've gotten away from the depth of what relationships mean, and too often it has to do with sex, and people mistake love and lust. And there's a whole world of difference between that, and some of it's hormones. Some of it is very definitely our society that promotes a sexual society and being young, and glamorizes being a parent because it's the hardest job you'll learn to love, but it's difficult. And I'm grateful that I was allowed to adopt later, because when you're really focused on establishing yourself and going to work every day and taking care of a house and maintaining your relationship, it's tough. I admire marriages that last and persist through that, but I'm glad I didn't do it when I was young. And the other thing, as a parent, I looked at Dany, and they asked Dany if he wanted to save his eggs. And because of Dany's health issues, genetically, he didn't want to pass a lot of that on. But I also looked at Dany and said, just remember, honey, you're adopted.
Mm-hmm.
You know, do you feel any different? I mean, we laugh because people say, and they have since the day he was born, that he looks like me. But people absolutely seeing us together, knowing us, nobody can tell the difference. Who knows? Who
and
cares?
It doesn't. Being adopted was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Right.
Because I mean, it was just a hot mess, and I don't think I could love my mom anymore. Because she's
that's
incredible.
That's very obvious.
Yeah, I love my mom. And she's an incredible person. And just, you know, I love her.
So as we wrap up here, Charlene, if you could say to a parent who, you know, thinks their kid might be trans, or who is going through this, you know, figuring out this whole exploration, if you could give them the most valuable advice you could think of, what would it be?
First, take a deep breath. Recognize that there are a lot of issues that have nothing to do with your child and have more to do with images and your own personal dreams and expectations. And then really educate. Find out the answers. Talk to people. Find the websites. Investigate. Don't do a flat-out no. Say a maybe. Or just as I did, give me time. Let me get my head around this one. Let me find out what it's really all about. And people, once you start hooking up, you get more and more and more resources. It would have been nice had I been on the websites before. I was already past a lot of things. What I do enjoy is that it gives me validation for my denial and my pain and all the things that I've gone through, and even some of the things when it perks back up and I think about daughter versus son, you know, that kind of thing. But it's a thing of patience, and you have to ask. I had to ask myself, and the thing that helped me more than anything else, remember, this is your child. The child, the person, the personality does not change. The only thing that really does change are some external mannerisms and a matching of, I guess, whatever makes us biologically who we are and makes our gender who we are, that there's a match in the calm. And I can just guarantee you that once you see the calm, lack of anxiety, and the peace that comes over your child, you'll know it's well worth it for whatever you as a parent have to go through, whatever I had to go through, whatever I still face, because, you know, it's a learning curve. I'm sure there's stuff down the road, but it's whatever, you know, it comes up. But breathe first. And yes, no, should not be there. I don't think it should be. Wait, give me time, investigate, learn, talk to people, talk to other parents, find out the resources. We in Cincinnati are blessed. I've heard of people from other countries as well as other states that are going out of state, out of country to get the help for their children. In Cincinnati, we don't have to do that.
Right.
So we're very lucky, and there are resources, and you know a lot, and I hope you will post on your website all of the different resources that are there for the parents to get in touch with and contact, because I think that's a tremendous resource.
I agree. And so, Dany, if you could talk to a trans kid who is having trouble navigating the relationship with their parents, what would you say? What would you say to that kid to try and help them understand more where their parents are coming from, or, you know, help them better navigate that relationship as they move forward?
I'd say, baby, Rome was not built in a day. And you've grown up, or you've presented this way for however long you have. and it's a shock to parents. Like, even if they saw it coming all the way, it's still, when you tell them, there is shock and there is hurt and grief because they are losing a daughter or son, but the parents have to realize they're also gaining a daughter or son. Or if you're gender fluid, you're gaining a child. What you've lost, you're also gaining.
Right.
And I'd say to the kids, don't give up before the fight is over.
Mm-hmm.
And also, Dany, please share what you've also said, that if you have non-supportive parents, and there are some that will not get their head around it because there always have been parents, suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And it's just because you're teens, you think everything has to be yesterday. Yesterday comes, but it may be down the road. And you have a line about, if you're 18, you can.
My thing was, there was a suicide in the city. We all know about this, Leela.
Right.
She had 6 months until she was out of that house.
Right.
My thing is, you can keep fighting. You can do it. If you're 17 years old, don't give up before you're 18, because it does get better. Doesn't matter how old you are, it does get better. And if your parents aren't supporting them, excuse my language, fuck them, because you can be who you are.
And yes, it's hard, it's painful, and you have to grieve too, but there are enough people in this community
to love you.
Yes, that are so warm and loving. It's not just the resources. This is an incredibly loving, supportive community, whether it's an LGBTQI, whatever. Tremendous community. I am so impressed and so blessed that we ended up here to have this community, and it gives me peace of mind for my kid to know that there is a community here that can
I will
be
say,
so
reach out.
supportive.
Reach out.
Yeah, that's the thing that's super important. At the end of every show, I have kind of a little micro speech that I give where I talk about, if you feel like you're alone, no one understands you, don't be afraid to reach out, because there is a community. And, that's not just some tagline that I wrote because it sounds cool at the end of a podcast. It's something that I sincerely believe. And I couldn't agree more. It doesn't mean that it's going to be easy, but there are most definitely people out here who love you and care about you. And I think that's probably the number one message.
I would say reach out to Glisten. Reach out to Glisten. Reach out to Heartland Trans Wellness.
Yeah, and their links will be in the show notes of the episode for sure.
They are behind you all the way.
And it isn't easy, and it is difficult, but it doesn't mean
you give up.
You give up.
Right.
It doesn't mean that there aren't people who can support you through.
Wow. I want to thank you guys so much for this.
You're welcome.
My segments on the show are usually 20 minutes long, and I am not going to edit this for time.
Awesome.
And that's okay. I figured this would probably go long, and that's fine because it's super important stuff.
And to talk to.
Well, no, trust me. If I thought that was going to be a problem, I would have stopped you. No. This has been amazing, and I cannot thank you guys enough for being so open and so honest about all of this, and just know that you're making a difference.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's all I wanted to do.
And that, my friends, is going to do it for this episode of the Atheist Manifesto on Secular Media Network. We learned so much from Dany and Charlene in the last segment. I really didn't think a special Be a Better Ally segment was necessary because that was basically an hour-long Be a Better Ally segment. So thank you again to both of you. You can find the show on Facebook at facebook.com/thegaytheistmanifesto. You can email us at thegaytheistmanifesto@gmail.com. I'm on Twitter at GaytheistCallie. And you can find the show on Twitter at The Gaytheists. Before we go, I want you to know that if you're lost, you're hurting, you're scared, if you feel like no one cares and no one understands, you need to know there's a community out here that loves you, cares for you, and knows that you're capable of amazing things and that you are worthy of love. If you're struggling, please don't be afraid to reach out. Until next time, friends, this is The Gaytheist Manifesto.